High Commander Veltar, the Conqueror, knelt in the ruins of his throne room while Jake Morrison stood over him with a weapon that could end his life with a single thought. The roles had completely reversed from that first day when the Zephyrian leader had demanded human surrender. Now it was the alien emperor who faced defeat and the human captain, who held the power to grant mercy or justice. The throne room was filled with representatives from every species that had fought in the Liberation War. Torvani warriors stood beside human marines while Althean engineers worked with Nexari, technicians to document the fall of the empire that had enslaved them all. The air was heavy with the weight of history being made as the galaxy's greatest. Military power submitted to beings they had once considered inferior. Jake looked down at the defeated High Commander and felt no satisfaction in the victory, too. Many good people had died to reach this moment, and too many worlds still bore the scars of Zephyrian occupation. But he also understood that what happened next would determine whether the galaxy moved toward freedom or simply replaced one form of tyranny with another. Veltar raised his head and spoke with the dignity of a leader who had accepted his fate. He asked for the traditional terms of surrender that the Zephyrian Empire had imposed on other species. His people would kneel before the human leaders and sign documents of submission. The empire would become a slave state serving its conquerors. It was the only form of defeat he understood, but Jake Morrison shocked everyone in the room by offering something that no Zephyrian leader had ever given to a defeated enemy. He extended his hand to help Veltar stand and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. "We did not fight this war to create new slaves. We fought it to end slavery forever." The terms of surrender that Jake proposed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyrian Empire would continue to exist, but as equals among the liberated worlds rather than their masters. Zephyrian technology and knowledge would be shared freely with all species. Most importantly, the Empire would formally recognize the right of every sentient being to refuse. SUBJUGATIO and Dr. Linda Foster worked with representatives from all species to establish the new galactic government that would replace the Empire. The Galactic Council of Free Worlds would be based on principles that humans had carried from their home planet to the stars. No species would rule over another. No world would be forced to kneel before foreign powers. Every being would have the right to determine their own destiny. The negotiations took months as representatives from dozens of species worked to create laws that would protect the freedom that had been won through so much sacrifice. The Torvani contributed their expertise in defensive technology to ensure that no future empire could conquer peaceful worlds. The Altheans shared their industrial knowledge to help rebuild worlds that had been damaged by war. The Nexari provided communication systems that would allow different species to work together. Despite their biological differences, Veltar surprised many observers by becoming one of the strongest supporters of the new galactic order. He had spent his life believing that strength came from the ability to force others to submit, but humans had taught him that true strength came from the courage to stand up for what was right. The former conqueror became an advocate for the rights of conquered peoples throughout former Zephyrian space. Elena Vasquez led the teams that dismantled the Empire's slave labor camps and returned millions of beings to their homeworlds. The process was complicated by the fact that many species had been enslaved for so long that they had forgotten their own cultures and traditions. Human social workers and alien volunteers worked together to help liberated peoples rebuild their societies and reclaim their identities. Years passed as the new galactic civilization took shape around the principles that humans had fought to defend. New species were discovered and invited to join the council as equals rather than being conquered and enslaved. Each new member learned the story of the humans who had changed the galaxy by refusing to surrender, when surrender seemed like the only rational choice. Jake Morrison served as the first chairman of the Galactic Council, but he never forgot the lesson that had started the Liberation War. Power corrupted, and absolute power corrupted absolutely. He established term limits and checks on authority that would prevent any single species or individual from gaining too much control over the government that protected galactic freedom. Dr. Lisa Chun continued her research into the technologies that had made human victory possible. She discovered that the key to defeating the Zephyrian Empire had not been superior weapons or better tactics. The key had been the human refusal to accept that defeat was inevitable. Other species had surrendered because they calculated the odds and decided that resistance was hopeless. Humans had fought because they believed that freedom was worth any price, the memorial built on Earth to honor those who died in the liberation. War bore a simple inscription that captured the spirit of human resistance. They did not kneel. Below those words were the names of every human and alien who had given their lives to end galactic slavery. The memorial became a pilgrimage site for beings from throughout the galaxy who wanted to understand what had made the difference between freedom and oppression. As Jake Morrison grew older, he often addressed new members of the Galactic Council with the same message he had given that first day when humanity refused to surrender. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the greatest strength came not from the ability to conquer others but from the courage to stand up and say no to those who demanded submission. The words that had started a revolution became the foundation of a new civilization, built on the principle that no sentient being should ever be forced to kneel before another. The human who had refused to kneel had taught the galaxy that freedom was not something that could be given or taken away by others. Freedom was something that lived in the hearts of those who were willing to fight, for no matter what the odds against them might be. Admiral Victoria Cross stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Freedom and watched the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the attack on Zephyr Prime. 6 months of liberation. Campaigns had freed 17 star systems, and the combined forces of 8 different species were now united under human leadership. The fleet contained ships and warriors from races that had never worked together before, but all shared the same goal of ending Zephyrian tyranny forever. Chief Tactical Officer Marcus Webb coordinated the attack formations while representatives from allied species provided intelligence about their specialized capabilities. The Torvani had contributed advanced shield harmonics that could protect entire battle groups. The Althean engineers had modified human weapons with focusing crystals that tripled their effectiveness. The Nexari stealth specialists had developed cloaking techniques that could hide massive warships from enemy sensors. Jake Morrison commanded the assault wing that would lead the initial attack against the heavily defended Zephyrian capital world. His ship Defiance had been rebuilt with technology from 4 different species, but still maintained the unpredictable fighting style that had made human resistance so effective. Around him flew pilots from worlds that had been enslaved for decades, but were now fighting for freedom with human courage and determination. The approach to Zephyr Prime revealed the true scale of Zephyrian military power. Orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet like deadly flowers, and each one contained enough firepower to destroy an entire human fleet. Energy shields that could stop atomic weapons protected the most important installations. The capital world had never been successfully attacked in the 1,000-year history of the Empire. General Katie Adams led the ground assault forces that would land on the planet's surface once the orbital defenses were neutralized. Her army consisted of human marines fighting alongside Torvani shock troops and Althean heavy weapons specialists. The Nexari had provided equipment that would allow the combined forces to communicate despite their different languages and biological requirements. The battle began when the Liberation Fleet dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the Zephyr system. Immediately, the alien defense platforms opened fire with weapons that could vaporize asteroids. But the attacking ships did not behave like any previous enemy the Zephyrians had faced. Instead of maintaining formation and advancing in logical patterns, the Liberation Fleet scattered in all directions like an explosion of deadly fragments. Marcus Webb had spent weeks developing battle plans that incorporated the fighting styles of all allied species. Torvani ships would absorb enemy fire with their superior shields, while Althean vessels provided covering fire with weapons that could penetrate any armor. Human ships would attack from unexpected angles using tactics that confused alien targeting. Computers Nexari stealth ships would appear and disappear like ghosts to strike critical targets. The Zephyrian defenders found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Every time they concentrated their firepower on One section of the attacking fleet, another group would appear behind them. Human fighters flew through defensive formations, like angry insects, while alien ships provided support with technologies the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Dr. Lisa Chun had developed new versions of the emotion amplifier devices that could be used by non-human species. The Torvani generated fear-based electromagnetic pulses that disrupted enemy shields. The Altheans channeled their anger into energy blasts that could overload Zephyrian weapon systems. Even the peaceful Nexari had learned to focus their determination into quantum interference patterns that made alien computers malfunction. High Commander Veltar watched from his command center as the orbital defenses that had protected Zephyr Prime for centuries began to fall one by one. His tactical computers could not develop effective strategies against an enemy that combined multiple species with completely different approaches to warfare. Every defensive measure he implemented was countered by tactics he had never seen before. The breakthrough came when Jake Morrison led a squadron of hybrid ships through the heart of the Zephyrian defense grid. His ships were equipped with Torvani shields, Althean weapons, and Nexari stealth technology, but they were flown with human instincts. That made them impossible to predict. The combination was devastating. Within minutes, the main defense platform was destroyed and the way to the planet's surface was open. General Katie Adams landed her forces at 12 different locations simultaneously while Zephyrian ground troops scrambled to respond to attacks that came from everywhere at once. Human Marines used emotion amplifiers to disable alien equipment while Torvani shock troops provided heavy assault capabilities. Althean engineers sabotaged critical infrastructure while Nexari infiltrators gathered intelligence about remaining enemy strongholds. The siege of the capital city lasted for 3 days as liberation forces fought their way through streets that had never seen combat before. Zephyrian soldiers who had spent their careers conquering other worlds found themselves defending their own homes against an enemy that refused to give up. Every building became a fortress and every intersection became a battlefield. Elena Vasquez had infiltrated the Imperial Palace and was providing real-time intelligence about Zephyrian command decisions. She reported that High Commander Veltar was preparing to activate a planetary defense system that would destroy the capital city, rather than allow it to fall to the liberation forces. The device would kill millions of Zephyrian civilians but would also eliminate the attacking army. Victoria Cross made the decision to accelerate the final assault, even though it would cost thousands of additional lives. The Liberation Fleet concentrated all remaining firepower on the Imperial Palace while ground forces advanced through the city without regard for casualties. Human determination combined with alien technology and tactical support created an unstoppable force that swept away the last Zephyrian defenses. Jake Morrison led the final attack on the palace where High Commander Veltar waited with his personal guard. The battle was fierce but brief. Zephyrian soldiers who had conquered 17 star systems could not stand against warriors who fought with the knowledge that failure meant slavery for their entire species. When the shooting stopped, the greatest empire in galactic history had fallen to a coalition led by the humans who had refused to kneel. Commander Elena Vasquez crouched in the maintenance tunnel of a Zephyrian supply station deep in enemy territory and listened to the alien guards discussing something that made her heart pound with excitement. They were talking about uprisings on worlds that had been conquered years ago. The Torvani species on Kepler 442b had destroyed 3 weapons factories in coordinated attacks. The Althean miners in the Vega system had collapsed an entire mountain to bury a Zephyrian military base. Elena had been presumed dead after her reconnaissance mission behind enemy lines, but she had actually been gathering intelligence about the growing rebellion that was spreading throughout Zephyrian space. The news of human resistance had reached every corner of the galaxy through captured communication networks, and the effect was electric. Species that had accepted slavery were beginning to remember what freedom felt like. On Earth, Lieutenant Colonel Bobby Turner worked in a hidden bunker, developing propaganda broadcasts that were being transmitted to alien worlds throughout the Empire. His messages were simple but powerful. Humans were still fighting. Humans had not surrendered. Humans refused to kneel. For species that had given up hope, these words carried a meaning that went far beyond their literal translation. The broadcasts showed footage of human fighters attacking Zephyrian forces with weapons made from scrap metal and determination. They showed civilians rebuilding destroyed cities while alien occupation troops watched helplessly. Most importantly, they showed Jake Morrison standing on the bridge of his ship and speaking the words that had started everything. "We do not kneel." Captain Jake Morrison received Elena's first transmission from behind enemy lines 3 months after the war began. Her report confirmed what human intelligence had suspected. The Zephyrian Empire was facing internal problems. For the first time in their history, conquered species were beginning to fight back using tactics they had learned from watching human resistance. Broadcasts. The psychological impact was enormous. The Zephyrians had built their empire on the belief that resistance was futile. Every species they encountered had looked at their superior technology and decided that fighting was hopeless. But humans had proven that technology was not everything. Courage and creativity could overcome any advantage if applied correctly. Elena reported that Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy were being forced to garrison worlds that had been peaceful for decades. The Torvani had developed sabotage techniques that were clearly inspired by human resistance cells. The Althean workers were using human-style guerrilla tactics to attack supply convoys. Even the peaceful Nexari had begun hiding weapons and planning attacks against their occupiers. Dr. Lisa June received data from Elena about captured Zephyrian technology and made another breakthrough that would change the course of the war. The aliens used a centralized computer network to coordinate their forces across multiple star systems. The network was protected by quantum encryption that was supposedly impossible to break, but it had one critical weakness. It could not adapt to input that followed no logical pattern. Working with a team of human programmers, Lisa developed a virus that used random human emotional responses as its operating code. The virus would spread through the Zephyrian network and cause their computers to make decisions based on unpredictable human feelings rather than logical calculations. The result would be chaos throughout their entire military command structure. The virus was transmitted to Elena, who managed to upload it into the Zephyrian network through a captured communication relay. Within hours, alien forces across 17 different star systems began receiving contradictory orders that made no sense. Supply ships were sent to the wrong destinations. Military units were ordered to attack their own bases. Entire fleets were recalled from important strategic positions because their computers had decided that defending empty space was more important than protecting valuable worlds. High Commander Veltar watched his empire begin to crumble as reports poured in from every corner of Zephyrian space. Rebellions that had been small and isolated were growing into full-scale revolutions. The virus in their computer network was making coordination impossible. Worst of all, human forces were somehow appearing in star systems that should have been far beyond their reach. Jake Morrison had been working with liberated alien engineers to retrofit captured Zephyrian ships with human crews and equipment. The hybrid vessels combined alien technology with human unpredictability to create weapons that were far more effective than either species could produce alone. Human pilots flying alien ships with human instincts were proving unstoppable in combat. Colonel Pete Harris reported from Mars that 3 different alien species had made contact with human resistance cells and were requesting assistance in organizing their own rebellions. The Torvani wanted to learn human sabotage techniques. The Altheans needed advice on guerrilla warfare tactics. The Nexari were asking for help in developing weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian armor. The war was transforming from a conflict between humans and the Zephyrian Empire into a galaxy-wide revolution of oppressed species fighting for their freedom. Humans had become the spark that ignited a fire that was spreading across thousands of worlds. Every species that had been forced to kneel was beginning to stand up and fight back, Elena transmitted intelligence about a secret Zephyrian research facility that was developing new weapons designed specifically to counter human fighting techniques. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that their Traditional methods would not work against opponents who refused to follow logical patterns. They were trying to create technology that could predict and counter human unpredictability. Jake Morrison realized that the war had reached a turning point. Zephyrians were adapting to human tactics, which meant that humans would need to evolve as well. The rebellion that had started with one ship refusing to surrender had grown into a liberation movement that spanned the galaxy. But the real test was still to come. The aliens were preparing for a final battle that would determine whether freedom or slavery would rule the stars. Dr. Lisa Chun stared at the alien technology components spread across her laboratory table and felt her heart racing with excitement. 3 weeks of careful analysis had revealed something that could change everything: the Zephyrian quantum harmonics that powered their weapons and shields had a critical weakness that no logical computer system could exploit. The frequency disruptions had to be completely random and unpredictable to work. She contacted Commander Ryan Torres, who was leading the tactical development team aboard the rebuilt human fleet. Ryan had been studying battle reports from every engagement with the aliens, and he had noticed something strange: human pilots who ignored their computer targeting systems and fired based on gut feelings were hitting their targets more often than pilots who relied on advanced calculations. Lisa explained her discovery, while Ryan listened with growing understanding. The alien technology was designed to counter logical attack patterns by predicting what rational opponents would do next. But humans were not always rational. When they fought based on emotion and instinct, they became impossible to predict. The key was to stop thinking and start feeling. Lieutenant Sofia Martinez volunteered to test the new combat doctrine during the next engagement. She disabled all computer assistants in her fighter and prepared to attack a Zephyrian patrol using nothing but her natural reflexes. The idea terrified her, but she had seen too many friends die following standard tactics that did not work against these enemies. The battle began when Sophia's squadron encountered 6 alien fighters near the Jupiter mining stations. Instead of coordinating their attack through computer links, the human pilots spread out and began flying based on pure instinct. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment and let her hands move the controls without conscious thought. When she opened her eyes again, her weapons were locked onto an alien ship that should have been impossible to target. Her first shot penetrated the enemy shields and struck the alien fighter's main reactor. The explosion lit up space as the Zephyrian ship disintegrated. Sophia's wingmen followed her example and managed to destroy a second enemy fighter by firing at the exact moment when his instincts told him to pull the trigger. The alien pilots were completely confused by attack patterns that followed no logical sequence. On Earth, Sergeant Danny Kim was implementing similar tactics with the urban resistance cells. Instead of planning complex operations that the aliens could analyze and counter, he began organizing attacks based on random opportunities. His fighters would wait until they felt the moment was right and then strike whatever target seemed most vulnerable at that instant. The results were remarkable. Zephyrian patrols that had adapted to human ambush techniques were caught completely off guard by attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. Supply convoys that followed protected routes were hit by resistance fighters who had chosen their targets based on gut feelings rather than intelligence reports. The aliens could not predict or prevent attacks that the humans themselves did not plan in advance. Commander Ryan Torres worked with pilots throughout the human fleet to develop training exercises that emphasized intuitive combat. Pilots learned to trust their reflexes and ignore the computer systems that had been designed to help them. The exercises seemed crazy, but they worked. Human fighters began winning engagements against superior alien technology by fighting in ways that no computer could understand. High Commander Veltar called for reinforcements from 3 additional battle fleets as his forces struggled against an enemy that refused to behave rationally. His tactical advisors could not develop effective countermeasures against opponents who changed their strategies based on emotions rather than logic. Every time the Zephyrians adapted to human tactics, the humans would do something completely different. Dr. Lisa Chun made another breakthrough when she realized that the random electromagnetic pulses needed to disrupt alien technology could be generated by human brain activity during moments of intense emotion. Fear, anger, and determination all produced neural patterns that translated into exactly the kind of quantum interference needed to penetrate Zephyrian shields. She developed portable devices that could amplify and focus human emotions into weapons that the aliens could not defend against. The technology was crude compared to Zephyrian equipment, but it had one advantage that made it incredibly effective. It was powered by the most unpredictable force in the universe, which was human nature. Colonel Pete Harris received the first batch of emotion amplifiers and distributed them to resistance fighters throughout the Mars colonies. The devices looked like simple headbands, but they could turn human feelings into energy blasts that could disable alien equipment. The stronger the emotion, the more powerful the effect. The next major battle took place in orbit around Saturn, where a human fleet led by Jake Morrison confronted a Zephyrian force that outnumbered them 3-1. Jake's ship had been equipped with Dr. Chin's new technology, and his crew had trained extensively in intuitive combat techniques. They were ready to test everything they had learned against the alien empire. Jake felt a familiar calm settle over him as the enemy ships approached. He closed his eyes and let his instincts guide the Defiance through a series of maneuvers that his tactical computer insisted were impossible. His weapons fired at targets he could not see while his ship dodged energy blasts that should have destroyed him. Around him, the rest of the human fleet fought with the same desperate creativity that had kept them alive for weeks. The battle lasted for 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Zephyrian force. Not a single alien ship escaped to report what had happened. High Commander Veltar received only silence when he tried to contact his patrol fleet. For the first time since the war began, the aliens had lost an entire battle group to an inferior human force. News of the victory spread throughout human space and reached resistance fighters on every occupied world. The humans had proven that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. More importantly, they had shown that the key to victory was not better technology or superior numbers. The key was refusing to fight by the enemy's rules. The first Zephyrian plasma blast missed the Defiance by less than 50 meters as Jake Morrison threw his ship into a spinning dive that defied every rule of space combat. The alien weapons were designed to target ships that moved in predictable patterns, but humans had never been good at following rules. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked frantically at her console on Luna Base as she watched the battle begin through long-range sensors. High Commander Veltar had ordered an immediate attack after Jake's refusal to surrender. The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 12 massive warships that had never failed to destroy any resistance they encountered. Their quantum torpedoes could punch through the strongest armor, and their energy shields had stopped every weapon fired at them. But the human ships were moving in ways that confused the alien targeting computers. Jake rolled his ship upside down and accelerated directly toward the largest enemy vessel while firing everything he had. The move was completely insane by any normal standard of warfare, but it worked. The Zephyrian gunners had expected him to retreat or try to escape. Instead, he was charging straight at them like an angry animal. His missiles struck their forward shields and created enough chaos for 2 other human ships to attack from different angles. Colonel Pete Harris coordinated the defense of Mars from his command center deep underground. The Red Planet held 3 million human colonists and the largest military base outside of Earth. When the Zephyrian landing ships approached the surface, Pete activated defensive systems that the aliens had not expected. Instead of trying to protect the main cities, he ordered his forces to scatter across the entire planet. The alien ground troops landed expecting to find organized resistance that they could crush with superior firepower. Instead, they found empty buildings and silent streets. Then the attacks began from everywhere at once. Human soldiers appeared from hidden tunnels and fired weapons before disappearing again. Civilians who should have been cowering in fear instead threw homemade explosives at alien vehicles and melted back into the crowds. Amy Rodriguez watched the tactical displays at Luna Base and realized that something amazing was happening. The human forces were not trying to win through superior technology or firepower. They were winning through chaos and unpredictability. Every time the Zephyrians adapted to one human tactic, the humans would change to something completely different. The space battle around Earth turned into a deadly dance as human pilots ignored their training and began flying on pure instinct. Lieutenant Sofia Martinez led a squadron of fighters in an attack that should have been suicide. She dove her ship through the middle of the alien formation while spinning like a top and firing in all directions. The alien point defense systems could not track her erratic movement, and she managed to plant explosives on 3 different enemy ships before escaping on the surface of Earth. The Zephyrian occupation forces discovered that conquering humans was very different from conquering other species. Sergeant Danny Kim organized resistance cells in every major city using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. His fighters attacked supply convoys with weapons made from farming equipment and industrial tools. They sabotaged alien communication arrays by climbing through maintenance tunnels that were too small for the larger Zephyrian soldiers. The aliens had expected human leaders to maintain order and help with the occupation process. Instead, every human seemed willing to fight regardless of age or occupation. Children gathered intelligence by pretending to be harmless, while elderly civilians provided safe houses for resistance fighters. The entire human population had become an army. Without uniforms or central command, High Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his forces struggle against an enemy that refused to fight properly. His tactical computers kept suggesting strategies that would work against logical opponents, but humans were not logical. They attacked when they should retreat and defended positions that had no strategic value. They sacrificed important military assets to save civilian populations and then used those same civilians as weapons against his forces. Dr. Lisa Chen worked frantically in her laboratory hidden deep in the asteroid belt as she analyzed captured Zephyrian technology. Her initial findings were disturbing. The alien weapons and shields operated on quantum frequencies that could be disrupted, but only by random electromagnetic pulses that followed no predictable pattern. The key was timing that could not be calculated by any computer system. The first day of fighting ended with losses on both sides, but the Zephyrians had failed to achieve the quick victory they had expected. For the first time in their history of conquest, they faced an enemy that seemed to grow stronger the more pressure was applied. Every human ship that was destroyed was replaced by 2 more that fought with even greater determination. Jake Morrison's ship had taken heavy damage, but he was still alive and still fighting. His crew had learned to trust his crazy maneuvers, and they followed his orders without question, even when those orders made no tactical sense. The Defiance had become a symbol of human resistance, and other ships began copying Jake's unpredictable fighting style. Colonel Pete Harris reported from Mars that the alien ground forces were requesting reinforcements for the first time in Zephyrian military history. The human resistance was not weakening despite heavy casualties. If anything, the attacks were becoming more creative and more difficult to counter. The aliens controlled the major population centers, but they did not control Mars, and they were beginning to realize that controlling humans might be impossible. Captain Jake Morrison watched the giant alien ship move closer to Earth through the bridge windows of his vessel, UES Defiance. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built, and it moved with a grace that made his stomach feel tight. 3 days ago, Earth had received the message that changed everything. The Zephyrian Empire was coming, and they wanted humanity to surrender without a fight. Jake had read the reports about what happened to other worlds that met the Zephyrians. 17 different planets with 17 different species had all given up when the Empire arrived. Not one had tried to fight back. The aliens would land their ships and demand that the leaders of each world kneel before their high commander. Then they would sign papers that made their entire species into slaves. It was simple, and it always worked. The communications officer turned to face Jake with worry in her eyes. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had been with him for 3 years, and she knew him well enough to see that he was planning something dangerous. The official orders from Earth Command were clear. Ambassador Kara Bennett would meet with the aliens and sign whatever papers they wanted. Humanity would become part of the Zephyrian Empire, and that would be the end of human independence. Jake touched the hidden recording device in his jacket pocket. He had installed similar devices throughout his ship without telling anyone. If, the aliens wanted a surrender ceremony, they would get one, but the entire galaxy would see what happened next. The Defiance appeared to be just another human warship waiting to be captured, but Jake had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The alien flagship was close enough now that Jake could see the strange blue lights along its hull. The ship looked like it was made from some kind of living metal that moved and shifted as he watched. Reports said that Zephyrian technology was far beyond anything humans understood. Their weapons could destroy entire cities with one shot, and their shields could stop any human weapon. Ambassador Bennett contacted Jake from the alien ship where the ceremony would take place. Her voice sounded tired and defeated as she spoke about the terms of surrender. The Zephyrians wanted all human military ships to power down their weapons and move to designated areas. All planetary defenses would be shut down. All human leaders would publicly kneel before High Commander Veltar the Conqueror. Jake listened to every word while his crew prepared for what they thought would be their last moments as free humans. The weapons officer looked at his controls with sadness. The navigation officer stared at star charts that showed human colonies throughout the solar system. The engineer reported that all systems were running perfectly, even though it would not matter soon. The ceremony began with Ambassador Bennett reading from a prepared statement about humanity accepting its place in the galactic order. High Commander Veltar stood over her like a giant crystal statue with 4 arms and eyes that glowed with inner light. His voice echoed through the ship's speakers as he explained how 17 species had joined the Empire peacefully. Humans would be the 18th. Jake waited until the moment when Bennett was supposed to sign the surrender documents. The entire scene was being broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system thanks to his hidden recording devices. Mars colonies were watching, Luna Base was watching. The asteroid mining stations were watching. Every human who was still free was about to see what happened next. Bennett reached for the pen that would end human freedom forever. The Zephyrian High Commander smiled with satisfaction as another species prepared to submit to his rule. His advisors stood nearby with recording devices of their own to document yet another victory for the Empire. Jake activated his communicator and spoke clearly so every human in the solar system could hear his words. This is Captain Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We do not kneel. The bridge of the alien flagship went silent. High Commander Veltar turned to stare at the human captain who had just refused the Empire's demand. Ambassador Bennett looked up from the documents with shock and fear in her eyes. The other alien officers began reaching for their weapons as they realized that this surrender ceremony was not going according to plan. Jake continued speaking while his crew watched him with growing amazement. Humanity does not bow to tyrants. We do not surrender our freedom to bullies. We do not kneel before anyone. The High Commander's glowing eyes grew brighter with anger as he understood that these humans were different from every other species he had conquered. For the first time in his long career of forcing worlds to submit, he was facing beings who refused to give up without a fight. Jake smiled as he ended his transmission to every human in the solar system. Show them what we are made of.